Aloha, everybody. Welcome to the second of 4 webinars that are presented by the Creative Lab Hawaii. My name is Charles Brotman. I am a composer-producer here on Hawaii Island and president of Hawaii Songwriting Festival, as well as the director for the Creative Lab Music Immersive. If you want to find out more about Creative Lab Hawaii, please check out the website and also make sure that you're on the mailing list for the Hawaii Songwriting Festival. Today's topic is you've released a single. Where do you earn royalties? And today we are lucky to have 2 of the most knowledgeable people on the planet about this that are going to help us to understand where these royalty streams come from and how to get them. So please, a silent round of applause for Bobby Borg and Michael Eames. I'm going to tell you a little bit about them before I turn them loose. Michael, you want to say hi so they know which one you are? Oh, you got your name there too, so I think we're okay. But
exactly. Aloha, everyone. Awesome to be as close to Hawaii as I've been in 2 years via Zoom.
Michael is a trained composer, songwriter, and pianist with experience in film scoring who studied at Cornell University. As president of Penn Music Group, Michael oversees all aspects of operation as well as pitching the catalog. Prior to starting Penn, he was involved with various catalogs, including the catalog of Jimi Hendrix, Chicago, Roy Orbison, and others. He has been a longtime advocate for songwriters and publishers, serving as president of AIMP, the Association of Independent Music Publishers, and also served on the Unclaimed Royalties Oversight Committee of the MLC, which we learned about at our webinar last week. So thank you, Michael, for all of that work on behalf of us songwriters.
Absolutely.
Also have to add that Michael has been a great friend to the music community here in Hawaii, volunteering on the staff at the Hawaii Songwriting Festival, and also as a mentor for the Creative Lab Hawaii Music Immersive. So thank you, Michael. And on to Bobby Borg. Bobby was a recording and touring artist, has over 30 years experience working alongside of the most respected musicians, songwriters, managers, producers, and A&R execs in the industry. He has taught music business classes at Musicians Institute in Hollywood, Berklee College of Music, University of Miami, UCLA, and USC. He also runs Bobby Borg Consulting, where he helps independent artists and music business professionals turn their art into more successful business. As a music business author, Bobby has written several highly acclaimed books on the music business, and his newest book, which was just released, he co-wrote with Michael Eames, and this is the book. This is my copy here, Introduction to Music Publishing for Musicians, and I highly recommend it. It's a great book, has a lot of detail, but the way that they have presented it, it's really easy to understand. So this is something that every songwriter should probably get a copy of it. I got mine on Amazon. So anyway, great work on this book, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You bet. So at this point, I am just going to turn it over to Bobby and Michael and let them take it away. So gentlemen, it's all yours.
Yes, everybody, thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely love being here. Like I said, I'm dreaming that I am on the, I feel like I'm there. I'm going to put myself there. I'm wearing the t-shirt. I've been wearing it all day. So
right, yeah.
Get me in the spirit.
And Charles, thank you so much for having us. As Charles mentioned in his introduction, what we're going to be talking about today is you've released a new single. Where do you earn royalties? And what we like to do is we like to base it on the independent musician. So what we mean by that is that's taking it under the assumption that you own all the rights in both your songs and your masters. It makes it simpler for you to understand because in many cases as an independent artist, that's typically where you start out, writing songs in your bedroom and then recording them. And then now you have this product and you're trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I make money from this? What do I do? So we're taking it from that perspective. We're going to cover a whole lot of stuff for you today. And Michael, what do you think? Should we share the screen and get going on this?
I think so. Let's, we'll try not to talk incredibly fast, but as Bobby said, we got a lot of ground to cover to try to cover both sides of this world, which you're about to see.
Right. So I should be sharing this screen with you now, and you guys should be able to see it clearly. And again, the title of our presentation is You've Released a New Single, Where Do You Earn Royalties for Independent Musicians by Bobby Borg and Michael Eames. And again, a lot of the material that we're going to be talking about today is based on our new book, Introduction to Music Publishing for Musicians. So a good place to start is first to make sure, and forgive us if we are sort of going back and reviewing anything that you guys have already learned in the seminar, but we think it's very important to at least preface our discussion by saying that it's important to understand that there's two different copyrights that we're going to be dealing with today in our conversation. And it's very, very important that you understand that, because a lot of people tend to kind of lump it all together, and that makes it more confusing. So the first thing, obviously, is when you take an original idea from your head and you put it into some sort of tangible form, a copyright is born, right? So when you take a song idea from your head and you put it into a tangible form, lyrics on a sheet of paper, a music idea into your laptop computer, a copyright's born, and it gives you an exclusive bundle of rights that we call CDPDs, right? And,
yeah, absolutely. Explain what that is.
Let's go ahead and do that. And so first copy, and then Michael will take the next one. So basically the first one, CDPD, is the right to copy or reproduce your work. So nobody can reproduce your work without your permission, knowledge, or payment. So that basically means that nobody can take your song and make a vinyl recording of it or a CD recording of it. They need to get permission from you first and foremost. So you get this right by just virtually of birthing that copyright, so to speak.
Exactly. And then the second one is that you also then you have the right to control the distribution of your work. That's the first D. So, you get all of these rights and these abilities to control it when you put it in that tangible form. And Bobby, what about the P?
Yeah, so the P stands for public performance of your composition. So nobody can publicly perform your composition without your permission, knowledge, or payment. And when we say perform, we specifically or mostly are referring to the two, no one could broadcast that on a radio. No one can actually put that into television. But this also applies to other more general uses of your composition and it being used publicly as well. And then finally, the last one is the fun one.
Yeah. The last one is you get to control any derivatives. That's this last D. So, a derivative is when someone will take any part of your work and usually excerpt it out and include it in their own work. I think the most common thing that everyone sort of thinks about is a sample, right? But there are also these things, and a sample is when you're taking both the existing recording and the composition and putting it in. And then there is also an interpolation where you're not using a recording, you're just replaying something. But it's almost even any element. Someone wants to take your lyrics, out of the song, having nothing to do with the melody. When there's any part of your copyright that someone wants to excerpt and use in a new work, that is then going to be called a derivative work, and you are the one that's in control of whether that gets permitted or not.
Mm-hmm. And derivatives and understanding that last is really important, especially if you guys are going to be writing with other people and you're going to be writing in situations where two or more people might come together to work with each other and then maybe get into some sort of argument or disagreement or maybe decide not to work with each other. A lot of times there's a misunderstanding that you could just go, I don't like Michael's lyrics anyway, and we'll just get rid of them, and then I'll get somebody else's lyrics and just kind of forget about Michael ever existed. So you have to be clear about when you come together to compose a song and you share either melodically or lyrically with another writer or some hook or tangible beat or groove, what you're creating is you're creating a joint work where the work is going to be jointly owned. And the parts are not so easily separable anymore. It's kind of like taking the Donald Passman sort of way of describing this is taking an egg and throwing it in the frying pan. And once that white and yellow come together, it's impossible to like separate the white and yellow and say, hey, we didn't mean to do that anymore. So specifically when you are getting ready to write joint works with and do collabs as the language has it today, you want to make sure that you really truly understand what you're getting involved in and what you're doing. And then to also have a clearly written split sheet that will determine, which owners own what, or which writers or authors own what part of that song. And it's always good to have that sort of tucked away in case you need to break it out in the future. Anything else that we should add on that, Michael?
Honestly, I'm just going to reemphasize the split sheet aspect of it because I cannot tell you how often it is that records come out. I mean, like big records that you all are hearing on the radio and done by your favorite artists, that they have not worked out the splits ahead of time. And to pick on hip hop a bit, it's honestly the worst in hip hop than any other genre, because it usually is so collaborative and multiple producers working on things. And it's just crazy to me how often it is never addressed. And but it is worth pointing out though, that back to Bobby's joint work mention, that the U.S. copyright law assumes that you are splitting everything equally, unless you have it written down otherwise. So, but we would absolutely recommend that even if you are going to split it equally, you still do a split sheet and have everyone sign it. And what has come up, actually, Bobby and I were just talking about this the other day with a class we were teaching of, this split sheet, say you're all coming together either as a band or you're writing for a particular artist. Part of what you can do as part of that split sheet is have everyone agree that it is intended for this particular artist to release first, right? Because everyone has the right to control what's called the first use. So, if you guys are all coming together to write for a particular artist, especially if the artist is in the room, hey, you artists, it's great for you to get everyone to commit up front that you are the artist that gets to release this song. Otherwise, there's been situations where multiple artists might co-write, and then one of them might be like, I think I like this song for me, and I think I'd like to release it first. And it can create a bunch of arguments. So address it up front.
Yeah, that should definitely be on the split sheet. And just to kind of make sure that you guys are a split sheet doesn't necessarily require you having to go out and get an attorney, and this doesn't have to be overly complicated. I mean, I've done split sheets, where generally, you have a piece of paper at the end of the session, you list the names of the writers, you list the splits in the song, you list the name of the song, you list, as Michael just pointed out, the intention of whom is going to use the song first. And then you might even note somewhere in there as well that, any other use needs to be agreed upon between all of the writers first, because there might be, someone might want to use the song in non-exclusively in a way that maybe someone doesn't agree with, like a certain type of commercial or a political campaign or something of that nature. So you want to make sure that everybody agrees on the use. And then there's some other items in there generally, but that pretty much is your PROs, et cetera. But Michael, isn't there also a way that some people are also using split sheets today digitally? I know there's two services that I've heard you mention in the past. Should we mention that? I think that's probably worthwhile. The digital split sheet versions.
Yes, absolutely. As I cough, geez. I know there's, it was splitsheet.com, and I'm trying to remember the name. I can try to look it up, but there was also a company, Audly, Auddly, but it changed names, got bought. So I can look up that.
While Michael's looking for that, I will tell you that personally, myself as an artist and songwriter in the bands that I've been with in the past, I always felt a lot better about just basically having a written agreement that with everybody's signature. And even if you had to duplicate it 4 times, that's not really that big a deal. And then I just put that in a filing cabinet and I tuck it away, under writing sessions. I always feel more comfortable doing that myself, personally, because I don't know, putting it on a website, on an app, and then kind of retrieving it 7 years later and hoping it's still there. I mean, that doesn't sort of sit with me, right? But I'm sure a lot of people feel comfortable with it, but nonetheless.
Oddly is now called Session. Sorry.
Right.
I just had to look it up.
So there you go.
Well, and before we maybe even move into income types, Bobby, am I jumping ahead if I mention anything about splits in regards to the master, or would I be jumping ahead?
Slightly, but
right,
hold that thought. Let's move on now to the masters, you guys, real quick. And just so now that we understand the copyright or the song part, now let's move on to the master part. A sound recording is also a copyright. So this is kind of confusing for a lot of people, but the song is one copyright and the recording of the song is another copyright. And they both have the same rights. You inherit both those same rights. But again, this is a source of confusion. Typically, the person that creates the master recording, the person that performs on the master recording, is the person that's entitled to a split of that master recording. So typically, since you're going to be an indie artist in your bedroom, writing the song and then recording it, you are the one that's actually performing on the master, and you're also the one that's actually creating the master. However, that sometimes, even in the indie level, isn't always the way it goes down. A lot of times you have a skill as a songwriter and artist, but you don't necessarily have the skill as the actual, producer, in which case you bring in a third-party person, where then we need to really make sure we're absolutely clear about who is going to own what. And this, again, is where a split sheet can come in handy, but it's also where I think Michael wanted to interject and talk a little bit more about this as well. So take it away. I just wanted to do that.
No, well, I just think we do so much work in sync at Penn Music Group, my company, and this issue comes up a lot, where a lot of people figure out the splits on the publishing side of it, the songwriting and the publishing side, but don't really address the master side. And I'm sure Charles, being a producer, and as you can tell from his visual, right, where he's literally in his studio as he introduced us, many times songwriters who are not producers assume that they're going to split the resulting recording in the same manner in which the song is split. And quite understandably, producers are like, hold on, wait a minute. Like, we wrote the song for 3 hours and you guys left the room, and I spent the next 20 hours of my life turning that song into this, commercially satisfactory master. And, I deserve a greater share of the master than any of you did. So in the indie world, a lot of times the producer and the artist generally split the master 50-50, but let's be honest, it's all negotiable. And there's factors of whether there's fees changing hands, and there's hybrids of, you still need to pay X fee, but I'll get X percentage of the master. There's lots of different ways to do it. There's not one right way. But I think it's important that everybody talk about that, as you're dealing with all of this, to avoid confusion later, because we've run into situations where a sync use was about to happen, and then everyone started arguing over how the master was going to be split, and we couldn't confirm the use because we couldn't get everybody on the same page.
Right. And then, of course, important to mention here as well is something called the work made for hire, which I'm sure you guys at least have heard or familiar with, in which case many times, when working with a producer and working with session players that might come on and play on that track on the record as well, you work out an agreement where they are working for hire under a paid condition, and just keeping it as simple as that, because it can get more complex. But generally what you're doing is is by virtue of being sort of the employer in this particular case, you're retaining all of the rights to the copyright. So these situations do happen as well. So let's move on, Michael. Does that work?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's jump into all the different income types.
All right, you guys. So now that we kind of, gave that brief introduction, let's get to work on what you guys came here to learn, right? And that would be the income money that you get once you publish a song or once you put it out there. So we call this the 4 food groups of music publishing. And as you can see here, we have mechanical, performance, sync, and print. Those are the 4 food groups. And then when those 4 food groups are used in foreign territories, we call that or refer to that as foreign sub-publishing, which are just the 4 food groups in foreign territories and how they're dealt with. So the first one is a mechanical royalty, and a mechanical royalty has a really interesting name. It sounds like something that an auto mechanic workshop would discuss or something. But it has a long history of why it's called mechanical that traces back to piano rolls, when music was sort of printed in piano rolls that played on pianos. And the word mechanical just has stuck, even though it might not make a whole lot of sense. So a mechanical royalty, another way to look at it is reproduction or copy royalty, maybe is how we can say it to make it more simply put. And probably keeping things even more simple, we can tell you that a mechanical royalty does to apply to when your song is reproduced on vinyl, when it is also reproduced in a CD, when it also is reproduced as what's called a DPD or digital phonograph delivery, which is a digital download. And it's also, it also happens in streaming as well. When a song is streamed, actually, a whole lot of stuff happens where basically by interacting with the interactive streaming service, essentially a cache of the song is being made on your computer, which is a copy. So these are all areas of reproduction. Again, vinyl, CD, digital download, and the stream. Now, it's handled differently. So when we're talking about like putting up a song on Spotify and Apple and Tidal, etc., that is handled differently than it is when you're talking about a reproduction of a CD and vinyl and digital download. So being mostly that you guys are probably interested in streaming, probably because a lot of you aren't going to make vinyl and CDs and probably not going to do digital downloads, we'll just go over it really, really fast and then get right to the MLC. So essentially, set into law by in copyright law, essentially a mechanical royalty gets you 9.1 cents per record made and distributed. It's the same thing that happens for CD. And it's the same thing that happens for digital downloads. However, there is a beast called a controlled composition clause that happens if you do ever enter into a record deal. And that clause generally tries to reduce that rate. I'm sure you guys aren't surprised by that, right? Another record company moved to reduce things. And it usually reduces it 3/4 of the rate. Except for with digital downloads. The controlled composition cannot apply to digital downloads. So that's just in general what you'll get on the mechanical side. When it comes to the streaming side, this becomes much, much more difficult though, however, and to say exactly what you get into a stream is rather complex. We'll give you a brief overview of that. Michael, if you want to talk briefly about that, and then also maybe mention to them too, like how they must work with the MLC in order to be able to collect that side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. As I'm sure Chris, Aaron from the MLC discussed last week, very, very quickly for those of you that might have missed it, there is a rate that is established by the Copyright Royalty Board. And, we're in the midst of fighting over this rate, frankly. There were rates that were decided upon. They're in 5-year chunks. But without diving down that Alice in Wonderland hole of the situation regarding the rates, let's just say that the rate that exists in the copyright law at any particular time for interactive streaming creates a pool of money that gets split between the mechanical and the performance. And we're about to talk about performance. But as of January 1st of this year, any interactive streaming within the US now runs through the MLC, the Mechanical Licensing Collective. And it's enormously important that you register your works with the MLC or you will not get paid. I'm on the, as Charles mentioned at the top in the bio of mine, I'm still on the Unclaimed Royalties Oversight Committee of the MLC. And our whole job is to just make sure that there is as little unclaimed royalties as possible, because we all want it all to go out to all songwriters and publishers as it should. And you would be shocked at like the amount of money that is out there, not only in the US, but around the world, from the mere lack of someone taking responsibility for their own compositions to make sure that they're registered. So Chris covered it, I'm sure, last week. Just please make sure you get everything registered at the MLC when you administer your own publishing. If you have a company that does it for you or is an administrator, they're the ones that are supposed to do it and will be the ones that they have to deal with the MLC. But if you don't have that, it's on your shoulders to do it.
Okay. And you'd be surprised how a lot of indie artists actually don't realize this. Actually, they think that the only money that they're getting is through their distributor. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, of course. So moving on to performances, the second food group. Again, this is one that typically most musicians are a little bit more familiar with. This is the royalty you get for the public performance of your composition, primarily in TV, film, games, I beg your pardon, TV, film, and general licenses like when you hear your music at a shopping mall, in a restaurant, etc. But the main ones are, basically the radio. I beg your pardon. I'm sorry. I'm going ahead.
I was just about to jump in with radio.
Yeah, I've got Sync staring in my face here. So, generally radio, TV, and the internet primarily. So, generally speaking, when your song, the way it works is when somebody wants to let's just say, for example, a radio station wants to play music or a television show, they're going to get what's called a blanket license from the PROs, which gives them the permission to use all of the materials that are sort of registered with that PRO. And then the PRO essentially monitors and pays you a fee. So you have to be obviously an affiliate or member with one of the three major performing rights in the United States, which Michael is going to talk to you about in a moment. But one thing I wanted to make real clear to you guys about the performance side real quick is that a lot of people think that just because you are now with ASCAP or you are with BMI or you are with CSAC, that every time your song plays, it's a cha-ching, money in the bank, and money is just going to come, flying in. It's important that you guys get everything set up and that you're prepared for that to happen. But generally, the faucet doesn't turn on and just the money comes pouring in right away. So Michael will talk a little bit more about PROs in general. If you could take over, Michael, from there.
Yeah, I mean, as Bobby mentioned, there are three main PROs in the U.S., though there's a fun fact is that there's actually 6 in total. But the main 3 in which everyone is usually a member is ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC. What tends to happen a lot with independent artists, and it's a little bit of a soapbox of mine, so I'm going to jump right on it, which is there are 2 different memberships at each of those societies. There's a writer membership and a publisher membership. A lot of the societies generally encourage the writers to only become a writer member and don't necessarily at the beginning encourage them to start a publishing company because there's usually a cost involved. But I would highly encourage you that you should sign up as both because especially when you get into the world of sync, which we're about to cover, with these things called cue sheets, they have separate columns for writer and publisher. It's just really important that you set up a publishing company. Otherwise, you run the risk of losing that form of income. But just like I mentioned when we just talked about the MLC, you'll never get paid unless you register your songs at the PRO. And it sounds silly, it sounds stupid, I know. And you're like, of course. You'd be amazed at how many people don't register their songs with their own performing rights society. They just assume oh, that must have happened when I uploaded my song to TuneCore or to CD Baby or just DistroKid, whatever. Like, no, you have to do that yourself, because when you don't register, you will not get paid.
And
So
as you mentioned, there is two different registrations as a writer and publisher. And I have noticed many times that people are registered as the writer and again, not as the publisher. That's very common, actually. All right, so moving on, now you have synchronization, and synchronization is when you take your music and you merge it with the visual image, such as in TV, film, and games, etc. And specifically, I want to mention that we are just talking about the publishing side here, the song side, the ownership and the song side. We'll talk about the master side later. But this could be a great area for you guys to not only build awareness for your careers, but also bring in money as well. And I just want to point that out, obviously, because a lot of people tend to have the Spotify playlist as their number one strategy and only strategy. And definitely you could think about, placing your music in film, television, as much as possible, and even out of the box uses as well. It could be even student films. It could be, documentary films from an up and coming documentarian, just definitely work this angle because it could be very, very useful. And quoting Michael Eames, sync is sort of what they call the new radio. It's a possibility for you to really get a lot of exposure out there and to build your career. So not only does it bring in money, and it's some of the money that you can be earning, it's a great way to actually build awareness as well. Now, Michael's going to talk a little bit more about how to do this, because you guys might say, okay, great. So, how do we do this? So Michael will talk a little bit about self and third-party reps.
Yeah, sure. Of course, you all can always pitch yourself, right? There are resources that exist. The one that I tend to go to the most is this company called the Music Registry, and it's musicregistry.com. They publish a bunch of different industry guides and contact information, and they've got a film and TV music guide that's really helpful, and lists studios, music supervisors, all of that. You also should be doing your own research of, you can look at, obviously when you're watching, say, television or a film, right, they're going to list the music supervisor that has those credits. You can make note of those. I'm sure have all heard about IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, which is a great resource that's actually owned by Amazon now. They also have a pro version that you can subscribe to that gets you that much more information. There are also, websites like, tunefind.com. I think there's tvshowmusic.com, though that got bought recently again, so it got changed into something else. But the URL still goes there, and these are all sites that track the music-centric shows episode by episode and include links to the music, so that you can get a sense of sonically what something sounds like. But as great as all these resources are, you have to know to yourself, look in the mirror and just be like, do I have the sales gene in me? You have to be a very social person. You've got to be very comfortable with people. You also, frankly, have to be very concise yet articulate, because reaching out to a supervisor yourself to pitch, it's an art. You can't write a book. You're writing a couple of sentences, try to capture what you do in a very short amount of time, maybe reference it to some other artists that are popular. My music is a la so-and-so meets so-and-so. And, I know you're working on this show. I think my music would be great for it. If you email somebody and ask them, what are you working on? It's already the kiss of death. They're not going to want to respond back to you and waste their time. You should show that you've done your research. But if you decide, I don't really want to spend all that time, I would rather be creating, well, then there are a whole lot of third-party representatives out there. There are a lot of licensing companies that can offer exploitation agreements. Some of those agreements can be exclusive or non-exclusive. And if we have time, maybe we can get into that, but I want to make sure, since we're over halfway, we cover the master side, obviously. But you give up a percentage though when you bring on a third party rep, so you have a cost involved with that. But so many of these reps and even full on publishing companies, they take the time to develop those relationships, constantly check in with the supervisors. And I'm, as you can tell from my gray hair, I'm old. I've done this for a while. I've grown up with a lot of the supervisors, and thankfully, one of the benefits of that is that, I'm on all their lists, and anytime anybody's looking for music, they tend to go out to their trusted sources and relationships looking for music. And that's, one of the benefits that you get by going with a third party, where you're already sort of tapping into their relationships, but you just have to understand that you'll have to be giving up some sort of percentage for that to happen. But it can happen both ways. I know of success stories in both scenarios.
And just to kind of wrap that up real quick, I'll let you know that the sync is pretty much the Wild West when it comes to negotiating the deals. So you really have to have someone that's savvy and understanding, what you should get paid. There's certain points of negotiation which are important, like where is it being used in the show or in the film, and for how long, and so on and so forth. But it's rather complicated to really understand how to negotiate those rates. So it really could be anything. I mean, it could be from a couple $100 to a couple $100,000, so sync is the Wild West. Let's move on to print. Print represents the smallest chunk of the four food groups. Print used to be king. Of course, this used to be the only physical sort of manifestation of music that existed in the past, but that's no longer. So print refers to when you take your music in printed form, and there's generally folios, there are mixed folios, and there are matching folios, and there's what's called single sheet music. So single sheet music is literally like, sheet music. It's not always single. It could be 1 or 2 or 3 pages, but it's it's essentially one song. Then you have what's called the folio, which is basically a catalog of one artist. When you have a matching folio, that is when there's a music book that matches the exact record in the same order. And it sometimes has pictures from the album and from you playing live and that kind of thing. And then there is what's called the mixed folio, where they mix different artists together. Typically, another use of print that you guys might be more familiar with also is when you see your music in lyric websites as well. That's sort of the digital version of print today. And then, of course, now you have all these websites that have downloadable sheet music and downloadable books as well. So that's kind of bringing print back a little bit, into sort of a more powerful sort of food group, but still it represents the smallest chunk. Michael, let's talk real quick about the different, real quick about the royalties and just kind of generally how it works.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's not a huge area of money, but you've got physical print sheet music, and then you got digital sheet music. The physical, you're going to get a lower royalty. It tends to, be like a single song. It's usually around 20% that you would get of the retail price of that one thing. And then a folio is going to be, 12 to 15% royalty, but it creates a pool. And like Bobby said, a folio is a group of songs, and that royalty creates a pool that gets divided amongst all the songs. In the digital world, because there's no longer any actual printed cost, it's pretty much established in the industry where it's a 50-50 split. So there's a company called musicnotes.com, especially, that I know a lot of indie artists have been able to use, where they'll even help you come up with the sheet music yourself. They'll take a slightly higher royalty on their side, but then you can direct all of your fans over to the Music Notes site to buy the music. So it's not a huge chunk, but honestly, if you get a song that everyone connects to and they want to start learning it and playing it, it can be surprising how much money it can add up to. So how you want to address sub-publishing, foreign stuff, Bobby?
So real quick, foreign sub-publishing, you guys, is when mechanicals, performance, and sync and print are sort of dealt with overseas or outside of the United States. And the reason why we separate it is because the way it is collected and oftentimes paid is quite different. So take it away on the sub-pub side, Michael, real quick.
Yeah, real quick, right? So, the whole idea of why we wanted to do this today was you've released a single. Where do you earn all the money, right? I know we've been kind of talking generally about these different income types, but, hopefully you're seeing that, when you release something, you're going to generate each one of these kinds of types of income. And in the sub-publishing world, the thing that's important, I think, to know, especially these days because of the interactive streaming, is that the MLC, as I'm sure Chris talked about last week, only addresses the US. But you've got interactive streaming happening all over the world. And if you're out there and are that popular, they're essentially different mechanical collection societies that exist just like the MLC, that exist in other territories around the world. The MLC right now does not yet have reciprocal relationships with them where they can send their money to the MLC and then you get paid from the MLC. So, think about it. If you have a hit on Spotify and you're getting all these streams, and let's say you had a big, exposure in Europe and you're getting all these interactive streams in Europe, well, there is a mechanical society in every country in Europe that is collecting the money from your streams, and you need to go in and collect it. And you really then enlist a sub-publisher to do that for you. You can enter into an agreement with one company who's got affiliates everywhere. We list SongTrust here because a lot of folks have gone to SongTrust. They are the system that powers CD Baby Pro, which some of you might be familiar with if you distribute through CD Baby, because they're always like pitching you on, hey, pay extra and join CD Baby Pro. But, you should know that there are lots of options to collect your money overseas. That's not just the only one, but know that those mechanicals are being held over there until you get a local publisher to register and claim them. In theory, your performance money should come back to you through whatever local PRO, domestic PRO you're a member of, but I've found that really doesn't always work as well as the system in theory should work. So a local publisher collecting for you in each territory helps that ensure that money comes to you. A publisher can also present sync opportunities for you in other countries. The TV market is the biggest here in the US, but outside the US, the ad sync market is huge. And then print is pretty similar. But I think we really just wanted to stress today that all of these kinds of money, yeah, this is how it's handled here in the US, but know that, there are 140 other collection societies around the world. So there's a lot of money that can be left on the table if you're not taking care of it.
Absolutely. So even if you're an indie artist and you have your record on Spotify, that essentially could mean that you're getting streams in other country and there's some money on the table. So you definitely have to consider, how you would end up going and collecting that money. So let's move on, you guys. Now we're on the other side. We're basically on the money you can earn from your masters. So again, being that you're an independent artist and you're both the songwriter and the recorder of your song, these are now additional monies that you can get to what we just discussed. Okay. So the first type of money that we'd like to discuss are sales or interactive streaming, right? So this is what we can call for today and the artist royalty, the royalty for being the artist and for, performing on your master and creating your master, right? So when your music, let's just say, for example, streams on Apple or Tidal or Spotify, you are going to get a royalty for being the artist. And that royalty is collected by your distributor. So whomever you're with, CD Baby, TuneCore, Ditto Music, Mondo Tunes, DistroKid, whichever you prefer, is going to collect that side of the money. So again, in addition to the other money that you get, which we discussed, right? So that would be sales interactive streaming. Now, most artists think that the only money that they get is through their distributor. Again, as we read it before, as we said before, and I'm going to read it now, is that you really need to make sure that you have that other side covered too with the MLC. All right. So if you, anything else that we need to add there, Michael, or you want to move on to non-interactive streaming?
No, I think you've covered it. So, I think the main thing we wanted to stress was, don't think that the money that comes through your distributor is your only source of money. There's so many other, sort of streams that sort of exist. But with non-interactive streaming, the whole idea, of course, is in non-interactive streaming is like a radio, right? You don't interact with it. You don't program it. It's like a radio listening experience. And in the US, the two biggest sources of that are Sirius XM and Pandora. So, and there is no mechanical related to those, by the way. We didn't specify that when we were just talking about publishing. There's only a performance on the publishing side. But what's really great on the master side is that due to a copyright law amendment, the Digital Performing Rights and Sound Recordings Act early in the late 90s, they established Sound Exchange. And it's a statutory right and requirement that anyone who does non-interactive streaming has to pay a set royalty that's set by the Copyright Royalty Board to Sound Exchange. But what's cool and also very misunderstood, so I'm going to do this real quick, is you should think of Sound Exchange as like the ASCAP and BMI for a master. There are two memberships at Sound Exchange. There is the membership to be the master owner, sort of half the pie, that gets 50% of the money. The other half of the pie is the artist side, and that 50% is actually split 45% of the 45 out of the 50% goes to the featured artist. And the remaining 5% actually goes to all the side artists who recorded on that record. That, like the bass player, the keyboard player, hell, the cowbell, the cymbal player, whatever. You played on a record, you are entitled to share in this 5%. But you need to register with Sound Exchange in order to receive that money. So they have a great website too, where you can, even if you've released things and you're like, wow, I've never gotten money from Sound Exchange, you can actually go on their site and see if they're holding money for you, because they actually list record label names and artist names of people that they're holding money for that have yet to claim it. But then you need to go through a very specific process of submitting an Excel document that shows all of the information regarding the recordings. You got to verify who you are, because they're very careful to make sure that no one who is not the person entitled to the money ends up claiming it and getting paid. Mistakes have been made, so they're being very careful. But if you're definitely getting airplay in the US on Sirius XM and Pandora, you are absolutely missing out on money. Because the shocking thing, which could be a whole other seminar in and of itself, and we won't get into it today, is right now masters make more money than songwriters and publishers on streaming. And the differential is about 6 to 1. So, the money any of us see, on the publishing side, the master owner and the recording artist are getting about 6 times that money. It's shocking. But it therefore means you need to really take care of, your own business and make sure you get registered. Bobby?
So we're going to wrap up the next three in 10 minutes. So we'll probably spend 3 minutes on each one, and then we're going to get to some of these great questions in the sidebar real quick. But synchronization, we already covered on the publishing side, but so obviously it's when your songs are used in film, TV, video games, etc. But now in this case, it's when the master of your song is used in film, television, and video games. And typically, so both of those things happen usually at once, obviously, right? If someone is licensing a recording of your song, right? A recording of your song in a film or TV or video game, etc., there's going to be two rights. There's going to be the sync side, or the sync fee, which is negotiable, and also the master side or master fee, which is also negotiable. But keep in mind that typically these are both paid on what's called on a favored nations basis. So whatever is offered to the song is going to be offered to the master. Whatever's offered to the master is going to be offered to the song. Again, typically this is done by yourself. If you have an opportunity to license something in a film or TV show, someone might contact you and say, hey, we'd like to use the song and master all in for this show. And in that case, you'll be called what's called a one-stop shop, because they're basically coming to you and they're getting both the rights. However, in some cases where you do have somebody representing you, as we talked about before, when you have a song plugger, an exploitation company reaching out to people, then they would assist you in those negotiations and collection of money. So again, just keep in mind that when we're talking about sync, we're also talking about two types of money. We're talking about the actual song, and then we're talking about the master. And then actually, just going to go off a little bit into the rabbit hole here and say, keep in mind that then when it performs on that TV show, now there's a performance royalty too, which is really nice. All right, Michael, you want to tackle the YouTube thing really quickly, like for 3 minutes or so?
Yeah, gosh, this will be fun. So, many of you, here's the great thing, I guess. I'll speak for myself, so I'm not putting it on everybody else. I have a love-hate relationship with Google and YouTube. There are certain aspects of our life for which we like Google and it's helpful. But, given that Google owns YouTube, YouTube is the most popular streaming service around, and it pays the worst of all of them. So, you, I'm sure, know that when you upload your masters, your distributor is likely, part of that process is whether or not you want to upload your music to YouTube, and whether you want to take part in sort of their YouTube ad revenue service. So what I think is important to understand of where this, because YouTube is a beast in and of itself. I'll explain the TT stuff in a second. But, because YouTube has what's called so much UGC, which is user generated content, everyone was uploading their own videos with everybody else's music that they didn't control. And that's a sync, and that's an infringement. So YouTube was in trouble because they had all these users using music without a license. And they were like, how are we going to deal with this? Well, the music business overall struck a deal with YouTube where we share in their ad revenue that, that comes from all those annoying ads that we all see on YouTube. And, there's different formulas, and I won't dive down that rabbit hole as to how much you can make and what ads are the best rates and all that kind of stuff. But just know that when you have your music on YouTube, you have the ability to share in the ad revenue, and you need to, on the master side, find out if your distributor provides that service, because YouTube doesn't allow everyone and their brother to have direct access into their content ID system, which monitors all this ad revenue stuff. You usually have to enlist a service either through your distributor, or there's third-party services like a company called AdRev, which is owned by the same company that's the parent company of CD Baby. There's also Exploration. There's a whole bunch of them. I mean, there's a whole huge list. And on the publishing side, know too that if your distributor offers it, it's probably offering it only on the master side. You've got to cover it on the publishing side as well. So keep that in mind. But I want to mention too, we've put this last category as sort of like a catch-all, and it all ultimately is sync because there's video involved. But, TikTok is such a powerful platform now, Twitch, and each of these social media platforms are in different stages of being licensed. TikTok has technically entered into licenses with most of the music business at this point. And not all distributors of independent artists have a deal yet with TikTok. So you should be finding out specifically, do you guys deliver to TikTok? Do you guys deliver to Twitch? Not all distributors deliver to each of these particular services. But if they do deliver to them, the good news is they're going to have some sort of agreement with that service so that you can get paid for many uses of your music on that service. But this aspect is truly the wild, wild west right now. Twitch is not licensed by most, distributors, record labels, publishers. They have trouble brewing. We'll see how quickly Twitch, which is owned by Amazon, comes in line. It'll probably be one of the biggest focuses in 2022, along with Twitter. Twitter is also completely unlicensed for any music that is on the platform. No one is getting paid right now. So just keep abreast of this kind of stuff, because as great as these platforms are for promotion, you aren't necessarily getting paid, and you want to pay attention to how one could get paid from these services. The last thing I'll mention, just to explain the acronyms we put here, is your distributor under how to collect for this. We list CDBP, which is nothing to do with our CDPD that we said earlier, but that was our shorthand for CD Baby Pro, and TC stands for TuneCore. These are two distributors that do specifically offer publishing administration services that also, through a sister company or through that same, overall parent company, might be able to collect these kinds of monies for you from these platforms on both the master and the publishing side. But you just have to sort of do your homework. Anything else, Bobby?
No, in 4 minutes, we'll do neighboring rights. So here you go. So neighboring rights, essentially, keep in mind that in the United States, when your song, or when your master, I should say, when the master of your song actually broadcasts on terrestrial radio stations, you are not paid. So the master owner, the performers on the record are not paid. Now, the only person that gets paid is the songwriter. Okay. Now, you
and
might
the
think
publisher,
about,
sorry.
Right, exactly. Songwriters and publishers. So you might be thinking, oh, okay, interesting. But you'll probably, be interested to hear that in most other countries, except for maybe one or two or three, you are paid for the performances of your masters overseas on terrestrial radio stations. So why is it called neighboring rights? Just basically because when you have a record, the song is on the record and the master is the neighbor. I mean, it's a horrible name if you ask me. They should call it a terrestrial radio performance royalty or something of that nature. But nonetheless, when you're talking about neighboring rights, or when you hear about neighboring rights, that's essentially what they're talking about. Again, you are paid for digital performances on non-interactive radio, which is a plus, which is a thing in the right direction. But currently, right now, you are not paid anything, and maybe that's going to change. But in any case, as far as collecting any performances of your masters that you might get overseas, that would be done by a sub-publisher or with your affiliation with Sound Exchange. So we got maybe 2 more minutes. You want to add something to that?
Yeah, only thing I want to add, just because I wanted to make sure that we explain all our acronyms when we try to distill everything into these charts. You'll notice that PPL is listed down there under how to collect for neighboring rights. And PPL is actually the UK society that is similar to Sound Exchange, that deals with all of these master performing rights, or these neighboring rights. So what happens a lot of times, now you can, when you join Sound Exchange, you can give them worldwide rights to your masters. And then Sound Exchange has what's called reciprocal relationships with other master collection societies, and they can, in theory, collect it. But again, I don't always trust those reciprocal relationship scenarios, because it's more of a reactive situation instead of proactive in collecting your money. So what a lot of US based people do is they'll join Sound Exchange, for the US, and then join PPL in the UK for the rest of the world. Is a pretty common sort of scenario. So just know that that's an option, and PPL actually does allow members from the US to join directly, even though they're the UK society.
And it's 6 o'clock. So we said we would wrap this up by 6 o'clock, and then make ourselves available to some of the questions that you guys have for us. So I think at this point right now, we're going to turn it back over to Charles, And Charles, I guess we'll decide which question you'd like to choose, and then we'll try to tackle it for you guys for the next 10 minutes or so, I guess, right? So,
well, I could see that Michael's been busy fielding some of them.
Sorry about that. You just figured like, hey, while Bobby was talking, let me see if I can answer some. But yeah. I know one I specifically didn't answer and said we would handle at the end is Daniel's question, which of course anyone can ask anything else. Please don't hesitate. But Daniel's
you asked if you could do either the MLC or Song Trust.
Yeah, all I wanted to point out on that is that, you know, as Chris, I'm sure probably mentioned last week, but, you know, the MLC, I'm so glad was its own separate webinar, because that can be a big deep dive, you know, kind of topic. But the MLC, you join the MLC, let me back that up. Whoever is allowed to join the MLC is whoever is the party that is entitled to collect mechanical royalties. So say, Daniel, I'm going to assume for the moment you're an independent, you know, songwriter, which therefore means you're the publisher, right? Because anytime someone writes a song, you're not only the songwriter, you are the publisher also, until you sign a piece of paper giving those rights away to somebody else. So that means you are the party that's entitled to collect the mechanical, so you can join the MLC directly. However, if you enter into an agreement with Song Trust, which was Daniel's question, or any other publishing administrator or any other service, you will not be allowed to join the MLC directly, because your administrator or whatever service you've appointed to represent you now has become the party that is entitled to collect your mechanical royalties. So they are the ones that join the MLC. You can always check if they're doing their job right, because the MLC has a public search database that anyone can check out, whether you're a member or not. And you can look up any song and see the information that they have in the MLC database. But I did just want to sort of make that, you know, distinction clear as to what happens.
Michael, Chris was talking about that in the session last week, and he was showing that there tends to be a lot of information in there that's not matched up or missing information, so songs are not getting registered. As a publisher, how do you feel about your artist going in there and matching up that information? Does that mess you up, or do you encourage that?
Well, I mean, the short answer is we encourage it. But what I think now, you know, what I've had this discussion with many of our clients, you know, is that, you know, to Chris's credit, you know, the amount of work that has gone in to launch the MLC is pretty mind-boggling. And it really is an amazing testament to Chris and his team that they've even been able to do everything that they have done up to this point. However, it's not perfect. You know, there are still mistakes being made, and there's massive amounts of data going on. And, you know, though we encourage our clients to go in and check things out, you know, what is part of the process is, just because something is seen in the public database doesn't mean that it isn't already been corrected and it just hasn't been reflected yet in the public database. There's a lot of this data reconciliation that goes on in the background that not a lot of folks are, you know, as familiar with. And, you know, things are websites. They have to refresh occasionally. They got to bring in the new data. And what is particularly, you know, fascinating now, I don't want to go too deep down this hole, but it's relevant, is that those of us that are MLC members right now have access to what's called the matching tool, which isn't yet available publicly. I'm sure Chris talked about it.
I think he said it was available.
Is it? Yeah. It may be now. It wasn't when it first launched. I think it was only for members initially. But yeah, maybe it's public now, because honestly, since I'm a member, I don't even really go to the public. I just log right in. But you know, what's fascinating, and I had a conversation with actually on this exact subject a few hours ago with somebody, is there was a lot of publicity around this $424 million that got dumped at the MLC in February of this year. And it was this huge sum of money that was for streams from 2020 and earlier that had never been matched and claimed and paid to the right people. And this matching tool allows us and anybody to go in and see some of the data that was in that big dump, so that you can go in and claim some of your performances. And what is fascinating, though, is that even for us as people who do this every day, you somewhat assume that like, oh, well, hey, I'm getting paid from Spotify. And you almost then somewhat assume that, well, geez, if I'm getting paid from Spotify, then I must be being correctly paid from all the other services that exist. But now as we're able to go through all this data, we're finding like things that like we assumed were all matched correctly, were never matched, because every service had its own set of data. So we're literally having to all go through our catalog song by song, release by release, and search in this matching tool. And it's been really kind of, surprising as to the amount of stuff we've been finding in there. But you know what? Who cares if it's micro pennies, whether it was a ton of streams or a few streams, it's still money. And it's our job to get it to the songwriters. So we have to just spend the time and do it. But, let's crowdsource it, right? If someone can find some information that we haven't found yet, well, then more power to us. We're all on the same side to make sure that the money gets to where it's supposed to go.
Right. So I see here that we had a question again about YouTube, and somebody was concerned about, based on what we just said, Michael, whether or not they should be concerned about uploading cover songs to YouTube. So we just want to be really clear that, literally most of my students, every single day, and clients are doing cover songs. And some of them are doing drum cover songs. Some of them are doing, guitar cover songs. Whatever the case is, they do this on a pretty regular basis, and they feel, because they see so many cover songs going up on YouTube, they don't understand the issue with regards to how a synchronization license must be granted in order for that to happen. However, considering the laws, the copyright laws, where essentially YouTube cannot get in trouble actually for these illegal cover songs being on their channel, but they have to take it down if the publisher asks them to, or either that, or they'll put ads on top of the cover songs and then pay a percentage of that money to the publisher. So should you feel concerned with doing that? Well, there's two things that can happen. If you put up a cover song, it is possible that it is going to get taken down, but most likely what I have seen is that ads run on top of it, and then the lion's share of that money goes to the publisher. Anything else that we need to add there?
No, it gets tricky. I've been reading Gaia's, post here as you did it, and it frankly is a publisher by publisher policy, right? Like you were just saying, Bobby, like the publisher, is usually providing to YouTube whether or not they allow covers to exist. But there's some publishers either that make the decision themselves, or their songwriter has told them, I don't want covers of my song up there. And then so a cover gets uploaded and then it gets taken down. But it becomes a bit tricky for sure. But, it's honestly hard to kind of deal with that. There are a few services, like I know one called We Are the Hits, that exists specifically for YouTube, that has pre-cleared a certain set of songs that you can deal with everything through We Are the Hits, and they'll make sure that it is legal. Everything's been pre-cleared for all the songs that are listed on the We Are the Hits site. There are others. I just happen to know about We Are the Hits has been one way in which they've tried to address this problem of someone spending time doing a cover, and then they are so excited to put it up, and all of a sudden it gets taken down.
I think there's another part or component to this issue here, something to do with the voice, as I'm trying to kind of read. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. I'm assuming it's Gaia, I believe. I'm sorry
Gaia
about
or
that.
Gaia.
Gaia,
Yeah,
Gaia.
one of them.
But there seems to be another issue, like here with The Voice, asking him to put covers up for the purposes of auditions and things like that. And you're not excited about doing it. It seems like there might be sort of another component to this that I'm not exactly understanding. I apologize, but it sounds like you have some sort of contract with The Voice, and they're requiring you to put up cover songs, and you don't really feel happy about doing cover songs. Yep, it sounds like that's kind of the situation. Well, I mean, we could talk about The Voice if you want to for a moment, or we could talk about America's Got Talent. In fact, I know the person that actually does the auditions for that. And there's a lot of people, there's among indie artists, a lot of indie artists look at America's Got Talent and The Voice as being an opportunity to kind of, expose themselves. Except the other end of it is that people are afraid of the contracts that, might restrict their careers. And those contracts can seem a little restrictive to many independent artists. So believe it or not, a lot of the people that I know, clients, students, they actually have chosen not to go the American Idol or The Voice route at all. And even when they have an opportunity to audition in Hollywood, they turn it down just simply because they don't want to get into those restrictive situations that it sounds like you are in right now. So sorry about that. I hope we kind of answered your question. Anything else we should tackle here?
What do you think, Charles? I don't know how
I
to
think-
deal with a raised hand. It looks like someone had raised a hand.
Oh, I
but
don't see. Let's see. Raised hand. Let me see if I can find that raised hand. No.
It says Lisa M raised hand, but I
think there was a question from Lisa way back up there.
Oh, was there?
Let me see if I can find it. Lisa. She was asking about the percentage. If a player were to do a work for hire, would they still get a percentage from Sound Exchange? So,
gotcha. And I had written. Actually, my answer to Nara kind of applies, Lisa, to your. If this is the reason why you're still raising the hand, is that if you do a work for hire. Unless your work for hire agreement specifically states that you're waiving any Sound Exchange royalties, then yes, you're still entitled to get them, because it is a statutory right with Sound Exchange for session musicians to get paid out of that 5%. So as long as you've not agreed to waive that, then yes, you're entitled. And then we had a question just coming in. Sorry, it was Nara again. Lisa, that's okay. It doesn't matter that it was an accidental raised hand. We love it. We love raised hands. Nara, yeah. So the answer is yes. Sound Exchange in session artists, that's the 5%. But it should be noted that that's instrumental artists. This is for instrumentalists, not vocals, right? So you have to have been playing an instrument as a side musician or session musician to be part of that 5%.
So really quick, before we wrap it up, I just want to point out to you guys that what we talked about today, obviously, is, you've released a new single, and then where do you earn royalties? I want to make sure that we're really clear of that these are the possibilities of where you could earn royalties. It doesn't necessarily guarantee, obviously, that there's going to be a whole lot of money sitting there waiting for you. As I, and as I pointed out, it takes a lot of streams for it to amount to a paycheck. It takes performances in certain areas in order to amount to a paycheck. It takes you negotiating and getting out there in order to initiate syncs, and so on and so forth. Now you guys know what the possibilities are, and now you generally know how to collect it and how to prepare. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the money is just going to come streaming in now all of a sudden. Just want to make that clear, because a lot of people, don't understand that. So,
Charles, sorry, I just realized if you'll bear with me, I can do it quickly. You made the comment earlier that I was answering a bunch of these as they went along, but I just realized that every one of my answers was only going to host and panelists and not everyone. So very quickly from the top, Nicole, if you're still here, if I was a producer, engineer, etc., I can sign everything over to the artist, correct? My answer was yes. If that's what you agree to, then yes. That's why everything needs to be talked about and an agreement put in writing. KC, so is there an MLC in Japan where Hawaiian hula, etc.? Yes, it's called JazzRack, is the society in Japan, and it's the biggest PRO in the world as far as the amount of money that flows through it. But they're very restrictive about who can become a member. So you usually have to go to someone that specifically is set up in Japan. And Charles also mentioned that, that definitely some companies have sub-publishing deals in Japan that deal with a lot of Hawaiian stuff. Daniel, we discussed. Lisa, you're right. Lisa, we addressed. Nara, you never saw my answer. But I think we answered it. And maybe that was everybody. Maybe that was everyone. If anyone posted a question that we didn't answer because I was stupidly responding to host and panelists and not everyone, please post it again. But otherwise we hope, if you have any questions, Bobby has up on our thing a way to, get in touch with us. And, we will always do anything for anyone relating to Creative Labs and Hawaii Songwriting Festival because we love them so much.
Oh, thanks, guys. We're looking forward to a post-COVID era when we can get everybody out here and we can all get together again in person instead of looking at these screens. So I guess we'll start to wrap it up here. I just want to once again acknowledge the Creative Industries Division of the state of Hawaii for their ongoing support of music business in Hawaii. So do check out their website for upcoming events and make sure that you are on the Hawaii Songwriting Festival mailing list. The next webinar in this series will be on January 6th. So if you need information about that, check out the Creative Lab Hawaii website. And I just also wanted to mention that for those of you that are interested, Bobby has a really neat thing that he does. If you subscribe to his mailing list, I did this after I met Bobby last year on the webinar, and he does these very short videos that they're usually about 3 minutes long, I think. They're just packed with information on all different topics about the music business. And I think they come out like, you do one a month, or how often are they? Once
twice weekly.
Twice weekly.
Twice weekly, yeah.
Oh, okay, great.
Bobby's a monster. I'm telling you, man, like he is his own self-contained multimedia machine.
Yeah, it's all topics, everything from music management to royalties to songwriting, you name it. And it's like 3 minutes of drinking from a fire hose. So I would really recommend that. And then also to the book. It's a great book, Introduction to Music Publishing for Musicians. So thank you guys so much for being here, and thanks to all the participants for showing up today. With that, I guess I'll say aloha.
Yeah, everybody, thank you so much. And just one quick thing, if you want, I see there's some people asking us, where can we see those videos? It's youtube.com/Bobby Borg. Oh, yeah. And then of course, be sure to look out on Amazon for Introduction to Music Publishing. And then of course, you can always contact Michael through his Instagram /Pen Music Group. So thanks everybody very, very much.
And Charles, do you know, can anyone re-listen? Guy is asking here, like, is there a way to listen to this after the fact? Since
yes, I believe that it's set up now so that you'll get a link from Zoom to be able to view the video.
Oh, fantastic. All right. I just saw her triple question mark. So I was like, got to make sure she's addressed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you so much.
All.
Aloha.